Alright, pull up a chair because we are getting real. This is not my usual kind of video, and it's also a little bit terrifying to make. But in the last almost a year since I came out in my 1,000 subscriber Q&A video, I've had a lot of people ask me how I managed to run a YouTube channel while being autistic. The quick answer to that is probably not very well at all, but since April is Autism Awareness Month, and since a lot of what I want to talk about today has affected the channel quite a bit recently, I thought if I'm gonna make this video, now's the time. Also, I'm kind of still on editing all the wedding dress stuff, so there's that too. So no crafts to show you today, and I totally understand if you nope out at this point. But if you stick around, I think this video could be really interesting, and I'd love to hear from people down in the comments about what you can relate to and what you can't. Admittedly, I had a bit of a struggle figuring out exactly what I wanted to say in this video and what sort of tone to take with it, because honestly, if I tried to properly describe all of the stupid everyday stuff that gets in my way, we would be here for hours. So instead, I'm just going to try and focus on the things that most impact my YouTubing, and with a couple of disclaimers attached. Content warnings for mental health probably go without saying. So the first disclaimer is that I can only speak about this stuff from my own point of view. My struggles are not the struggles of every autistic person, my advantages are not the advantages of every autistic person. I'm not in a situation where being fully myself is in any way dangerous, which is something that a lot of people have to deal with. We tend to have what's known as a spiky profile, which means that we are way above average in some areas and way below average in others. Depending on what those things are, each person has a completely different set of strengths and weaknesses, and therefore a completely different way of existing in the world. I cannot emphasize enough that this is one person's experience and nothing more than that. And the second thing I want you to understand before we get properly stuck in is how debilitating being neurodivergent can be. I choose that word because this very much does not only apply to autistic folks. See, I've always been absurdly lucky in my life. My friends accept me for who I am, and it seems like there's always been someone there to catch me when I've fallen. Despite this, and especially when I was younger, holding down a job used to be basically impossible. I've been borderline homeless and relying on the generosity of friends to keep me going multiple times. And yes, I don't want to get too negative here, but I've had some extremely touch and go dark thought moments, if you know what I mean. All that said, please do not worry about me, I'm genuinely in a great place now. But all of that was with being absurdly lucky and being as supported as you could possibly be, so you start to get an idea of how difficult things can be for people who aren't so lucky. This video is about being an autistic YouTuber, but even just a base level of existence as an autistic person can be exhausting. Some days that base level of existence is just all you can do. I think it's really important to try and get that message across, so sorry for beating you over the head with it, but also kinda not sorry at all. Anyway, that's the disclaimers out of the way. There are, of course, some unique challenges that come with running a YouTube channel as an autistic person. But there are also some sneaky advantages, at least for me and the way I experience the world. So I'm going to talk about both, sometimes probably both at the same time, because like perfectionism in a job interview, autistic traits can kind of go both ways. So, being a YouTuber involves various things, and the main one, of course, is making videos, on preferably a somewhat consistent basis. Now that can be a lot more work than you might think. I see a lot of new creators have the absolute shock of their lives when they realise how much goes into this. But being autistic on top of that can kind of be a nightmare sometimes. Firstly, we've got the all too common executive dysfunction. Among other things, executive function is basically your ability to start, juggle, complete tasks, whether that's a work-related project or going for a run or just brushing your hair. And the worst part about executive dysfunction is that from the outside, it kind of just looks like laziness. Like you are just sitting there doing literally nothing. But in your mind, you're freaking out. You know the thing needs done. You want to do the thing, but you just can't. And that's really difficult to explain to people who don't experience it, and it just makes you hate yourself even more. Yay! Part of this struggle for a lot of us is what's known as autistic inertia, which is exactly what it sounds like. Once we start doing something, we just tend to keep doing it. And if what we happen to be doing is nothing, then changing from doing nothing to doing something can be a huge amount of effort. For a lot of us, transitions are the absolute worst, and especially if we're hyperfixated on whatever it is that we're doing, it can take someone else pulling us away, otherwise we will just sit there and keep doing the thing until we slowly start to starve. Now, if I happen to get stuck in editing mode, that's great for my channel. I will sit there for an entire day, perfectly happy editing. I won't notice that I need to eat, that I need to pee. All that exists is editing. But if I get stuck, say, planning out new video ideas when there's actually only a day until the next one is supposed to be published and I really need to be editing that instead, it's not so great. And do not even get me started on waiting mode, where an appointment or a task that happens later in the day can make that whole day a total write-off. Or the common autistic difficulty with unexpected changes that can throw us off our game for way longer than you might think. So first up, you might quite rightly be wondering how we even manage to function at all. To which I would remind you that functioning tends to be measured from a neurotypical point of view. Yeah, burn. But we're not neurotypical, and it makes no sense for the same standards to apply. Unless your YouTube channel is making a good income and it's how you support yourself and it's absolutely essential that you keep up the pace, it makes no sense to try and match the output of other creators. It's way more important to spend whatever executive functioning you have on the more important things in life, whether that's your work, your family, whatever it may be. And then use any capacity you have left over to find a video pace that isn't going to burn you out. Personally, I've settled on a system where I try and post on Wednesday, but if a video isn't done by any given Wednesday, instead of hustling to get it done and then leaving myself very little time for the next one, I'll just roll this one over to the following Wednesday. It gives me a bit of room to breathe. Of course, not feeling guilty about doing that is easier said than done, especially since I have skipped so many videos this year so far with all of the wedding stuff going on. But we'll get there, and it is definitely a much more healthy approach than my old one. And in terms of keeping the day-to-day tasks running, if you've watched any of my videos at all, you probably know I'm the world's biggest fan of outsourcing my whole brain to productivity apps and systems. It does take a long time to find something that works perfectly for you, but if you can get something like that set up, it is such a game changer. I have my Monday morning routine down. I have my end of week review. I have reminders to eat. I have defined places to put any video ideas that pop into my head so I'm not actually holding on to them in my brain. And I've found ways to make accessing and doing all of this as easy as possible because any friction at all is going to make those transitions even more difficult. I even have a special waiting mode to-do list so that if I do find myself completely stuck, I have a set of instructions there on exactly what to do and I don't need to think about it or make any choices by myself. We can do things just fine, but everybody, autistic or not, needs to find a way to work with their particular brain. For some of us, that's just a little bit more involved. For others of us, it might look like a completely different type of productivity to that neurotypical standard. But we can do things just fine. Okay, that was quite a long section, and it's because executive dysfunction and its various sub-bits are such a huge part of life for anyone affected by them. But of course, I have plenty of other weirdnesses to talk to you about. One thing I absolutely did not realise was going to be such a big deal when I first started YouTube is eye contact. Oh, no. Not liking eye contact is a pretty stereotypical autistic trait, and don't get me wrong, I can do it when I need to, but even among my closest friends, I usually just be staring off to the side while I talk to them. I imagine it's a little annoying sometimes. That's actually one of the reasons that I love always having a craft project with me when I'm around someone's house, because it gives me an excuse to be looking at something completely different. Pro tip. So when I'm recording videos, I'm in the room by myself. There's nobody to make eye contact with, right? But it turns out the camera is just as awkward. That represents your eyes and I know it. Especially in the very early days, I would go to edit my footage and towards the very end of every sentence, I would look down, like this. Every time. And it made editing cuts between sentences just so janky. But there are some easy ways to make this way less of a big deal. First up, you can obviously do faceless videos that rely on voiceover. Those are so much easier. I don't like to go completely faceless in videos if I can help it, but quite often I will film an entire thing voiceover only, and I leave filming the intro and outro right to the last minute until I absolutely have to get it over and done with. I've also got into the habit of filming just 1 or 2 sentences at a time, then freezing my expression whenever I pause. Then when I'm done, I'll take a couple of seconds just to look away, breathe, calm down a little bit, and the awkward expression pause makes it much easier to edit bits together later. People have actually told me I'm good on camera, but yeah, the reality is a little different. And that's the thing, YouTube videos are not reality. They can be as close to it or as far away from it as the person making the video wants them to be. It's not like streaming. With on-demand videos like this, you are completely in control. You can reshoot things that go wrong. You can cover up awkwardness or mistakes with B-roll or memes. Maybe you're personally fine with eye contact, but you find yourself just moving a bit awkwardly or stimming halfway through a sentence and you don't necessarily want people to see that part of you. That's fine. You don't have to bare your soul to make a YouTube video. edit away anything you don't want people to see. It is completely up to you what you share with the world. Everything you see in my videos is me, but it's also only one side of me. It is genuine passion for my subject presented with genuine awkwardness and genuine self-deprecation. But it's also a little bit more confidently articulate than I would be if we met in real life, or if, God forbid, I tried to make an unedited video. Because smoothing over those bumps in my communication style makes the videos easier to watch, and that is the experience that I want my viewers to have. Also, can I just say, it is so scary putting yourself out there when you've had a whole lifetime of being told you're doing things wrong and never understanding why. I absolutely dread saying the wrong thing or being misinterpreted in a video and not even realising that I've misled or hurt someone until it is way too late. It's going to happen eventually, and it's going to be just like when I was 10 years old and Victoria Pollock's mum banned me from future sleepovers at their house because she thought I was rude and I didn't understand why. I still don't know what I did. Which is exactly why I said making this video is terrifying, because it's a pretty serious subject and I do not want to say anything that accidentally makes somebody feel bad. But you can't just live in fear all the time, right? At least that's what I keep telling myself anyway. And thinking about communication, or lack thereof, leads me to my next subject. Social energy, or lack thereof. The absolute best part of creating video content has been getting to know so many new people. Some of you have channels of your own, others I only ever talk to down in the comments or on Instagram or Mastodon. Some people who I've met through this I now consider to be my actual real friends. But social struggles are part of the literal diagnostic criteria for autism, and let me tell you, the struggle is real. Sometimes it's like a switch just flips in my brain from everything is normal to no more peopling today, and figuring out when that's going to happen is kind of still a work in progress. If I've been especially busy or sick or I'm worried about something in particular, I know my social energy is going to be low, but other times it just seems to be completely random, and I'm still to this day trying to spot the pattern. Thankfully, and I'm sure you won't mind me saying this, most of my audience are kind of introverted yourselves, so I don't really worry about this stuff being misinterpreted or about you being mad at me for not responding to a message fast enough. But it does have an impact anyway, because as a content creator you are expected to keep up with the various algorithms, to constantly be pushing out content, and to be always available for interaction, because interaction equals visibility. Yeah, I literally cannot do that. Socializing is really fun, but it's also really draining because I'm constantly overthinking everything I say and running all of my responses through a "how would a real human word this" filter, because otherwise I'm worried that things will come out wrong. Like just about everything else in the entire world, social media algorithms were not made with me in mind, so there's really no point trying to measure myself against them. On top of that, there's all the other social stuff too, like I will see creator friends working together on cool projects, but I know I don't have the energy to really pull my weight, so I just don't join in. I get requests to start a Discord server, but I just honestly don't think I could handle it right now. My choice isn't between take it easy or work really hard to keep up. My choice is between do what I am physically capable of doing, or push myself, burn out, and spend weeks if not months recovering. So in that sense, the choice is easy. But it does mean I grow more slowly. It means I miss out on fun projects or building a closer community. Unfortunately, sometimes you just have to accept your own limitations, and for now at least, it is what it is. Okay, so one thing that is slightly less impact in terms of YouTube but still super annoying is the common autistic need for information and the resulting long-windedness. Let me explain. If I am faced with advance warning of a new place we're going to visit, a new situation I'm going to be in, new people I'm going to interact with, I go into information gathering mode, and the more detailed info, the better. For example, searching for a restaurant. I'm obviously going to need to be able to see the menu online, but I'm also going to need to get an idea of the internal layout. I'm going to need to see pictures of the food. I'm going to need to read literally every review I can get my hands on in case any of them in passing mention something I wasn't expecting. What's their reservation process? If it's a phone call, then that's me out immediately, because side note, having a phone call be the only way to contact your business is super ableist.
Society.
But if it's an online form, that can raise further questions. Do the fields make sense? Is anything ambiguous? Looking at you, Tomahawk Steakhouse, which option am I supposed to select if I'm booking dinner for a large group? And if you're wondering how all of this would go if I wasn't given advance warning of the new thing, well, imagine all of these questions coming to you in about half a second, and they need to be answered, but you have no way to answer them, but you need to answer them, but you can't answer them, and yeah, it's just best to give me advance warning of new things. Every new thing needs to be researched like this and every single question answered. So at this point, can we just take a second to understand what that must be like for Dave to deal with? He is so patient with me. I am so lucky. So unless you have this problem yourself, you might not realise how little information a lot of businesses put about themselves online, especially the ones who just have a social media page instead of a website, and all you can find is a 6-month out-of-date blurry photo of their menu or price list or whatever. But anyway, I'm getting off track from YouTube stuff. This information gathering thing is actually quite common with us, and when you combine it with the previously mentioned lifetime of being misunderstood and not understanding why, we have a tendency to try and communicate in the way that we wish people would communicate with us, which means lots of information and redundant clarifications to make sure we can't possibly be misunderstood. A bit like this video, basically. One thing you may or may not know about YouTube is that in many ways, it rewards brevity. Long intros or overly in-depth explanations will lose you so many viewers who, if you're lucky, will just skip to further in your video, but most likely will just leave. It's so alien to the way I communicate, and even though I'm getting better at it, I probably still do waffle a bit too much at the beginning and end of videos. But practice makes perfect. As a compromise, what I've started doing is I'll write down everything I want to cover in a video intro, I'll take a break, I'll come back to it, I'll decide what is actually the one most important thing that I want to say, and I'll either discard the rest or I'll move them to later in the video. It's made a big difference to my retention stats, and I have to grudgingly admit it does make for a better flowing video, but it hurts my heart. Now, I could go on indefinitely. There are so many ways that having a different neurotype affects everything in your life, and it bleeds into things like doing YouTube because it bleeds into literally everything. But it's time we had a bit of positivity up in here, I think, so here are some ways that being an autistic YouTuber is actually pretty great. First up, and most obviously, I think it's clear from my videos that I have a strong, enduring passion for making stuff. Special interests are common in autism. Sometimes they're a bit wider like mine, sometimes much narrower. Sometimes they last a lifetime like mine so far. Sometimes they chop and change frequently. And some autistic people don't even have special interests at all, which might surprise some of you since it's one of the more well-known traits. Being so completely immersed in an interest means I do not get bored with my subject. I talk about it with genuine enthusiasm, which I think does come across, and I like to think it's even sometimes a little bit infectious. I just love making stuff. Love it. And as a result, I can't see myself ever running out of video ideas. I see so many newbies talking about where people get their ideas from and how to keep it going long term. But meanwhile, at one video a week, it would take over 3 years to get through my current list. That kind of passion is a huge win. And of course, it also gives me the drive to jump into a new craft or technique and just learn everything I need to know pretty quickly. I literally never get tired of learning new ways to make stuff. So that means there'll always be new things to try on camera, and let's face it, new fails for you to watch while I get my bearings. And the last thing I'll say on this is that being passionate about stuff is just really, really fun. I honestly love it. No complaints. Alright, this next point I want to raise comes from a place of massive privilege. I'm really aware of that, but it is my experience, so do not come at me, okay? One common trait of autistic people is black and white thinking, which is a tendency to always see things as this or that, right or wrong, just or unjust. For a start, that really limits your sponsorship options as a small craft YouTuber, because let me tell you, there are a lot of really dodgy shops out there that would like me to get you to buy their stuff. But I won't be doing that, because it's kind of skeezy. Another side effect of the black and white thinking can be that we're often very honest. Often a bit too honest. We'll sometimes admit our feelings on a subject a bit more readily than other people would, and combined with the inability to read the room, we've got a bit of a reputation as oversharers. Me? No. Now that can apparently be really annoying in real life. But on YouTube, where every other person is trying to be something they're not or impersonate the biggest creator in their niche, I think that kind of authenticity is a real breath of fresh air. All of the channels I watch are just people vibing and doing their own thing in their own way, and that is why I enjoy them. It's also what I hope I'm doing myself. Beyond the minor edits that we already talked about, like removing pauses and things, what you see with me on video is what you get. What I'm really interested in talking about that week, my real thoughts on the subject, my real anxieties, my real crafting successes and my real crafting fails. My real personality and my real tips and systems for keeping your hobby manageable if you have a brain like mine. Unfortunately for you, my real face in all its gurning, double-chinned glory. The more authentic the creator, the more unique the perspective, which I think makes for better content in general. But in the case of autistic folks, it also helps people to see that we are also just people, trying our best, same as everybody else. One thing that can be a bit of a blessing and a curse with autism is that we can be a bit uppity around the status quo and questioning why things are the way they are. We tend to think outside the box and look at things in a different way, and sometimes that means we can completely understand a rule and why it exists, but we decide it's stupid, so we just ignore it. This is actually a really big strength in creative jobs and any kind of problem solving, but it can also be a big weakness in, say, a corporate role that values conformity. In terms of YouTube though, I think this is an overall benefit. When I first started, I did what everyone else does. I Googled for help. I tried to find out exactly how the algorithm works, how people structure their videos, general hints and tips, you know the deal. But instead of taking everything I read at face value, I looked at each thing in turn, decided why that rule exists and whether it was something that I wanted to accept. As an example, it's generally accepted on YouTube that the best way to grow your channel is to make sure you have a defined niche for your content. This is absolutely true. A lot of my subscribers are only interested in watching cross-stitch videos, so if I made all of my videos about cross-stitch, I would have a way higher click-through rate, way higher views, and of course, way higher ad earnings. Yes, I am literally saying I know how to make more money out of this, and I've chosen not to. My reasoning was that if everyone is focusing on a very specific niche, where is the content for people like me who just love making stuff in general? I watch so many niche channels and I really enjoy them, but sometimes it does seem like a shame to have to get my sewing fix from one creator and their community, and then my polymer clay fix from a totally different creator and their totally different community. Why can't we all just get along? So even though I understand the rule about finding a niche, and I even completely agree with it, in some ways it would be much better for me, I choose to disobey it because it just doesn't quite fit with what I'm trying to do. This is a very minor example of rule-breaking tendencies, but hopefully you get the idea. And also hopefully you're not mad at me right now for making this video, which is definitely not about cross-stitch. Right, you know what? I'm just gonna say it. I think being autistic makes me good at making tutorials. I have a bit of a tendency towards that logical mind good at maths stereotype, which I do want to emphasize is a stereotype. It's just, in this case, it's accurate. And it's not like I'm a robot, I am perfectly empathetic and probably a bit too emotional, but just in terms of digesting and structuring info, I have a logical approach. I have the ability to see something from a high level and a really detailed level at the same time without really thinking about it. So I can take a project or a problem and just sort of instantly see what's needed. I have no better way to describe that. What research needs to be done? What order the project tasks should be completed in? What relies on what? What are the gaps in the plan that need to be filled in before we all go our separate ways and work on this? I just sort of see it straight away. So this comes in really handy with tutorials because I can look at a subject and I can just immediately identify what are the questions that a newbie would ask. I don't know, I'm not explaining this well. My tutorial style is not going to be helpful to everyone because let's face it, we all learn in different ways. But I get a lot of compliments on being able to present information in a clear and understandable way, so I'm just gonna take it. This little section was awkward to film because it's way less socially acceptable to congratulate yourself on something than it is to give yourself grief about something. But you know what? It's okay to be proud of things you do well. Right, I've got no idea how long this video is getting, so I'm just going to wrap up the main points there. There's obviously so much else I could have said, and there are so many things that will affect other autistic YouTubers that do not affect me. For example, I have some relatively minor sensory issues, but for me it's mostly around noise and food, which doesn't really come up. Someone else might have an extreme sensitivity to light, in which case you're going to struggle with the studio lighting setups that don't bother me at all. Like I said right at the start, we are all very different. There's a reason for the saying, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Okay, if you've made it right to the end of this ramble, thank you very much for indulging me. I know it's uncomfortably different from my usual content, but it's also really important to help people break out of this idea that autism is just the 3-year-old white male child genius with violent outbursts. So if this video has helped one person understand just slightly more about what it's like to live with a non-standard neurotype, job done. As you might imagine, this was a bit draining to make, so I would really love to read your comments on all of this, but I'm also a little bit scared to do so. It might take me a while to actually pluck up the courage to look at them. But now at least you understand a bit more about why. Okay, I promise to be back soon with some actual crafty nonsense. So in the meantime, have a brilliant rest of your day and keep making cool stuff.